Get ready, folks, as there might be yet another captain coming to the MCU. Of course, I'm talking about Brian Braddock, aka Captain Britain, a protector of his homeland that is essentially his source of power outside of the amulet of light that made him who he is, which was more than enough for me to look things up and give you a first look into the character and his chance of becoming part of the MCU. So without further ado, let's dive right in. The latest Doctor Strange sequel introduced the Illuminati, and one of the members of the superhero group was Peggy, aka Captain Carter from Earth 838, a different timeline from what we've been used to. The main timeline where all the previous events took place, Earth 616. Although her screen time was limited due to Scarlet Witch's breach of the headquarters of the group, many fans started to speculate that she might actually be MCU's version of one of the more popular characters of Marvel Comics, Captain Britain. And judging by how she looks and the centerpiece of her shield, the look is there, but this is actually wrong. And not only because she is an entirely different character, as per Marvel Studios' description of the character, but also because of the fact that the company might be thinking to introduce Brian Braddock, aka Captain Britain, with his look possibly matching that of the comic book counterpart. Brian Braddock was the youngest child, born a few minutes before his twin sister Elizabeth Braddock, in his ancestral home located in the town of Malden, Essex, England. Brian was an excellent student of physics who, ahead of his age, managed to graduate from London's Thames University. Living under Dr. Travis's mentorship, he was present when the mercenary Reaver and his men raided the facility that the two were in. And in an attempt to call for help, he rode off on his motorbike, but was run off the road. Bleeding to death, he was approached by Merlin and his daughter Roma, who told him he could live if he became Britain's next champion, after which he was offered the Amulet of Light. And that is how he became Captain Britain, the next champion of the British Isles and its people. One of the first tests as a superhero came when Reaver came back for him, who was defeated by the hand of Brian, which eventually proved to be just the first of many adventures under the mantle of Captain Britain, with one of his prominent enemies being the Slave Master. In the Marvel Comics, he also teamed up with Steve Rogers against the likes of Red Skull, something that brought to him immense popularity. However, not all people saw him as a hero, but rather a villain or an anti-hero, especially Di Thomas, the chief inspector, who dedicated his life to find Captain Britain and unmask him, with Detective Inspector Kate Fraser Thomas's subordinate being more sympathetic to the novice hero. There are a lot of interesting Captain Britain adventures, and I would have to take more than just a day to tell you all about them. But there is one thing I want to mention, which I think could take place in the MCU. One particular period during Brian Braddock's endeavors, which saw him giving up the Captain Britain identity, allowing his sister Elizabeth to take up the mantle. However, not fit to wear the suit, his sister lost both her eyes in a battle against Slave Master, and Brian stepped back in as Britain's premier superhero. As an aftermath of what happened to his sister, Brian fell into a deep pit of despair, heavily drunk all the time, eventually finding himself alone in the world, and with his flame reignited by the sight of the X-Men who reached out to him, not only to tell him to hit that like button just like you should, if you haven't done so already, but no. In reality, not only did they reach out to help Brian pull himself out of the state that he was in at that time, but also to serve as one of the heroes that will save the world. After a few successful missions with some members of the X-Men, Captain Britain was joined by Captain America and other mutants to go form Excalibur, Britain's premier super team. Yet another team that looked like the Avengers, only this time coming straight from England, a place where the base of the team's operations was placed too. By the looks of things, you might say that Captain Britain could potentially be even stronger than Captain America, simply by the fact that Captain Britain also got the powers to fly. However, Brian also has his limits, or one limit that I should say, and that is Britain, with his power suffering diminishing side effects if he were to be gone from the land for quite a while. Now, I do not know what is happening at Marvel, but there is good enough reason that we might actually get a Captain Britain standalone project. or him making a cameo appearance at the least during MCU's Phase 5 and Phase 6. Seeing how the comic version of the character had a lot of connections to many of the present superheroes in the MCU, but also the events that are about to take place in the near future, particularly the Secret Wars storyline that will be getting an MCU adaptation through the already confirmed Avengers Secret Wars movie that, as it stands, should premiere on the 1st of May of 2026. As I mentioned before, many fans have mistaken Captain Carter's persona for that of Captain Britain. However, despite the similar costumes, there are some major differences between the two. The first thing is their origins, with Britain's power given to him by the likes of the aforementioned Merlin and his daughter Roma, and Carter being made in a lab, much like how Steve Rogers became Captain America in the comics and in the live-action MCU. Their powers also differ. The formers come through magic, and the latters came from science. One of the key similarities outside of the costumes is the fact that both of them, no matter the means of creation, were designed to protect their patriotic land. So you can see that there are many differences that separate the two, even by these few details that I've told you about. However, this does not mean that Britain could not work in the MCU, and here is exactly why. Brian's origin story of becoming a superhero in order to avoid death would be a strong pursuit for Marvel Studios if a project regarding the character gets underway. His connections to the team Excalibur, which played a huge part in the Marvel comics, and him being part of it, as well as one of the founding members, could possibly set a series of plot threads that could get explored, especially if you smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. But no, in all seriousness, especially if you take into account his attempt to bluff his way through Avengers-level threats, eventually making his story a tragic, comedic, and often relatable one, something the MCU needs right now, because there are some things that are about to happen that you might not take well. Looking at you, Rocket, who will probably be in the focus of the upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 movie, a story filled with his origin story that will connect the MCU to the likes of Herbert Wendman, aka the High Evolutionary, one of the big baddies of the MCU's not-so-distant future. The other interesting thing regarding the character and his potential MCU debut is the fan art that recently surfaced on the internet, which saw Henry Cavill put in the role. And let me tell you straight away, he would absolutely kill it. That is, if the fans' desires come to fruition at Marvel Studios, and he becomes part of the MCU in none other than the role of Brian Braddock. And before you say that this is practically impossible, I'm not sure that you've heard the news, but James Gunn, the one responsible for the creation of DCU, according to some latest news, the rumored Henry Cavill sequel The Man of Steel franchise was swept under the rug, with his cameo in the latest Black Adam movie practically meaning nothing. Thus, he would be free to do a thing or two for the character. And seeing just what caliber of an actor he is right now, there seems to be no particular obstacle for Marvel to pick up on fans' desires and make things happen, no matter what the case may be. Captain Britain's addition to the MCU would prove to be a unique thing, simply because of the history that the character has in the comics, who is very different from many other superheroes who started from being frauds to becoming well-renowned superheroes, with Brian's case being all of the struggles that he goes through to reach that point in his superhero life. See you in the next video.